like to do is talk you through the change model that's been produced and published by the NHS Institute. And then I think what we'll do is just pause for, 5 minutes questions after we've done that. And then I'll go into have a bit of a deep dive on just one of the areas, which is around spread of innovation. So a number of you will recognise this, particularly if you are a big fan of the NHSI, or whether you were looking for it as part of preparing for your new futures within the CCG, or just swatting up in general on some of the theory that we have available to us to enable us to do our jobs better. And this model, when I first saw it, I was fairly sceptical about it. It was like, there's nothing new in there. It doesn't tell me anything that I don't already know. But what it does do is bring all of that stuff that we do all know implicitly together into one place. And what's really helpful in the webex is over the next few weeks is you'll get a series of people within our own CCG that take us through each of the individual components. And the reason we've made the decision, I think in part to do this internally, was that one of our clinical lead at the governing body, when we exposed her and some other members of the governing body and the leadership team for the CCG, she was very clear that we didn't need a load of management consultants coming in to help us with our work, unless it was on very specific technical bits that nobody within the organisation has the knowledge or the expertise of. She was absolutely passionate and very, very certain that we had all of the skills and all of the abilities and all of the brain power that we needed internally. And for me, that was a huge vote of confidence in us as an organisation that wasn't even authorised at that point, but also just demonstrates, when you look at the webexes that have come up over the next few weeks, I think you'll find that to be true. And I'm sure Annette wouldn't mind me saying that if anybody wants to get involved in this further, we're absolutely delighted to work. This isn't just a kind of senior manager thing. This has to go through the whole of the organisation. So in front of you should be a 6-sided shape, which I think is a hexagon, but I'm not very good at stuff like that. Oh, it's 7 sides. I also can't count, so that's really helpful. 7 pieces. 7 pieces, anyway. So in the middle of that is our shared purpose, and I think as a CCG we do have our shared purpose, healthy people living healthy lives in healthy communities, supported by our mission statement, which I can never remember because it's just got too many words in it, and then the 3 core strategies that we should all be fairly well versed in. And what the NHS Institute team that devised this with stakeholders from the rest of the service were saying is that to deliver a shared purpose as an organisation, you need to do or be able to undertake all of the elements in the 7 jigsaw pieces. So you need to have the ability to lead change. You need to be able to be persuasive and treat your staff well to engage and mobilise. You need to learn a range of system drivers that are available to us and how we use them and at what points. To do that, we need to be absolutely transparent with our measurements, so we're absolutely clear what it is we're setting out to do, and then how we will know when we get there. We need to be ensuring that we've got the ability to deliver rigorously. We need to be able to use our improvement methodology, whatever that might be. It might be Lean, it might be Six Sigma, it might be something that we choose to design ourselves. But, there are certainly some fantastic tools and models out there that we would want to use, I would suggest. And then once we've done all of that, how do we then spread the innovation? And I think that's a real challenge for us as an organisation. We have a number of directorates that cover the whole of our CCG, but also we have our localities. And there is the very real risk of being a large organisation that we all retreat into those silos and don't get the best out of us as an organisation in our totality. So I'm going to pause in a minute. We're going to focus a bit more on the spread of innovation in the last bit of this call, but you've been talked to now for probably about 5 or 10 minutes, and I just wonder if that's an opportunity just for about another 3 or 4 minutes to have a pause and just see kind of how is this working for you, and any initial thoughts on the overarching change model. So has anybody got any questions or queries or comments? You need to take your phones off mute if you do want to say anything.
Has everybody seen it before?
Yeah, I've seen it before.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, we'll move on to the innovation slides then. Okay, so as part of the sessions, I was asked to focus on spreading of innovation. So I'm hoping you can see those slides okay. So, so these are people who, when I was researching for my topic, because I had to provide Annette with a lightning rod thing, bolt thing, and the day before, as a true Matson style, I still hadn't done it, and I thought, do you know what, I don't actually know very much about innovation and spreading it at all. So I thought I'll go on the internet and find out from some experts, and actually it's quite reassuring. You do realise that you can that you know slightly more than you realise. But these were the people that really stood out to me, and some of them you will have either heard of or had the privilege of working with. So this guy here, to whom the arrow is pointing, is a chap called Paul Plisek. He's an American who has the most extraordinary amount of energy. A hugely charismatic bloke who has done enormous work. He's an author. He's worked with the NHSI on a very regular basis to help design and develop some of their products. Annette and I both been privileged enough to work with him ourselves. And he has some really interesting ideas about kind of change and developing sort of social mobility and the energy and the enthusiasm to create change. Many of you will recognise this gentleman. This is Sir Ian Carruthers, who you will remember quite fondly, I'm sure, locally. And he published a document last year called Innovation, Health and Wealth. And you know, from a personal view, it's quite an interesting document. It certainly narrates the huge amount of innovation that the NHS has had since its inception. And before its inception, goes right back to the discovery of penicillin, the first MR, etc., etc. But what he does is really highlight the fact that whilst the NHS is incredibly good at innovating, and we do it incredibly well on an international level as well, actually we're not terribly good at sharing that. And when you think about the number of organisations that have taken part in productive wards and productive theatres, there are still pockets in the country where those programmes of work haven't really been embraced and certainly not implemented as well as they might be. The guy here is a chap called Don Berwick. He works for a health improvement organisation, a bit like the NHSI, but he works in the States. But he's quite a good commentator on what we do in this country. I think he's quite envious about the opportunities that we have within the NHS. And it's his organisation that really helped deliver the improvement methodology around lean, around process mapping and Six Sigma, and actually build that into a product that we could use within this country. And so his partner in crime is on the right, and that's Helen Bevan, who works for NHS England now, but has been Chief of Staff with the NHS Improvement Agency, and just has a really interesting outlook on life and a really good, knowledgeable challenger of what we do locally and nationally. Peter Drucker, who's an author, a programme manager, a professor, and a change agent who presents internationally, who a lot of what he was talking about many years ago is still very much the basis on what we do now. And then this is something I hadn't really come across, and that's the TED Global sessions that are available. And if you type in TED, you call these up, and they're amazing. They started in 1984. They're webcasts or snippets of conferences that generally last about 18 minutes or less. So, you know, they're dead easy to be able to just sit and listen to for a little while, dip in, dip out as you see fit. They are broadcast internationally and have some really renowned speakers, lots of previous presidents, prime ministers, and really motivational people have been part of that process. And what's really interesting is that since January, when they kind of really got going with this in the internet, in January 2009, there were about 50 million people or watches on the sessions. By June 2011, that had increased to 500 million. And by November 12, that had increased again to 1 billion. And so there's a real good platform there to learn from in terms of how we might want to spread innovation. And I guess partly the purpose of what we're doing over the next few weeks with these sessions. So, when I was reading through the literature in my mad panic to try and pull the sessions together, I did a lot of reading, and what they very clearly say, and this slide is taken from Sir Ian's presentation and report, is that to mobilise any change within large organisations, but particularly the NHS, you need a range of mechanisms to make that happen. You need some top-down pressures, and we all know how they feel and what they look like. Horizontal pressures from peers, from colleagues, from other organisations, and then bottom-up pressures that come up through the front line. I just need to alter the slides slightly because I think some of you are struggling to,
that one can be closed
to
down,
see them. Okay, can you still all hear and see?
Yes.
Lovely, thank you. So there was a merit bulletin published in 2011, and so if you remember, the last slide was about top-down horizontal pressures and also bottom-up pressures. And so this was a really useful insight is around with the bureaucracy of what we have in the NHS. The clinical staff have a huge measure of control and influence over day-to-day decision making, which is much greater than people in formal positions of authority. So if you think back to those top-down pressures, how effective are they likely to be in an environment where your frontline staff either don't feel empowered or able to effect the change that they can see needs happening on a day-to-day basis? And so the view is that if you try and impose from a top-down level, you will at best get limited impact, but actually what you also might get is an absolute resistance to change. And Moss Cantor in 2006 said that if you didn't invest in the human side of innovation, you make a big mistake, and that previously when he'd looked at where innovation and work hadn't worked particularly well, it was because there hadn't been the winning of the hearts element. So when we think about change, and we could easily apply this to any diagonal slice, I would suggest, through our organisation, is we will have about 2.5% of people who work in our organisation who have the ability to adopt change at at slightly faster pace than other people, and that's because they're either a little bit maverick or they're risk takers and will always want to fly up high and do things very, very fast. But then you'll also get some people who are really frightened of change, can't see how it's relevant to them, or just really don't get why change is needed, and they have a low adoption rate of change. And then you get the biggest proportion of our staff that are smack bang in the middle, and you'll get some that are kind of bit more up for it than others, and then you'll get the others that will want to wait and see whether some harebrained scheme is going to work for them, and then they will gradually be persuaded and then come along with us. And so, and I would suggest that's fairly representative of us, and is, I think, nationally accepted. So again, when I was looking at this, I was thinking, well, what is it that makes people change? And I was taken back to Prochaska and Di Clemente, which published some work in 1984, and is very much used by health promotion and health improvement teams up and down the country, around how do you move people from pre-contemplative, so not even thinking about wanting to give up smoking. How do you enable those people to move into a place where they want to contemplate making that change, so thinking about giving up smoking, taking them through into the preparing to, so what advice, what support, what information, what resources might I need to make that change, and then actually getting on and making that change. And then once that change has been made, the really difficult bit in terms of maintenance. And people can move from the pre-contemplative to the preparation phases on quite a few times before they actually get into the action and then the maintenance. So Gollop, Whitby, Buchanan and Ketley suggested that we should be using a staged matched intervention that links with people's readiness to change. And so certainly within the Western locality, what we've done is focus particular work and actions on particular specialties with particular elements of our sub-localities to bring about those matched interventions to the change, rather than going for, we want to change everything about this particular service and we're going to do it whole scale across the whole service or the whole geography. We're taking a slightly more incremental approach. So again, I was discovering in my reading and came across this, and there's kind of this view about, you know, right side of brain, left side of brain. When you want to develop innovation, or you want to spread innovation, you need to come at it with using both sides of the brain, really. There needs to be a real focus on energy, which is energy for change, which is about stimulating people's imagination, securing engagement, mobilising, moving people, the call to action, the excitement about what the future might look like. And that mobilises people's minds for improvement and change. And then with the left brain, focus around effectiveness and efficiency. So looking at the metrics, looking at the clinical systems improvement, reducing variation, pathway design, evidence-based, which is the clinical system mindset for improvement. And I would suggest that over the last few years, particularly with the work that we've all done around map of medicines and pathway redesign, that there has been a huge focus on the clinical system mindset for improvement. And I think one of the challenges for us as an organisation, particularly in our role as strategic commissioners, is how do we use the mobilisation mindset for improvement, really building on what I think has been really good work undertaken within the wider Devon localities around clinical system change. So there are 7 dimensions of organisational culture, which when people look at the most innovative organisations in both the public and private sector, people will say all of these 7 dimensions are there for the change. So there's the risk-taking behaviour, resources, information, targets, tools, rewards and relationships. And to me, they both bring together that hearts and minds elements of what we need to do. There's an absolute need to align other key objectives for our organisation. I think we've done really well with the vision statement and the 3 core strategies, but what that really means when you're working with your team at the front line of strategic commissioning, I'm not sure we've particularly explored that. And what we also need to do is ensure that the meaning of innovation is really clear, so that the staff that we support as senior managers, and by that I don't just mean the staff within our own organisation, I mean with our system responsibilities as well, so that we can really support other partners and other organisations to get to a new state of the future, but in a way that really resonates with them. And certainly I have to say, I think doing the work around innovation in preparing for these sessions has really made me think differently about how we do stuff in Western. And it's been really helpful, and I hope that I've managed to sell some of that to you, and that you actually get some things out of today's session that you feel you can take forward with your own teams for the CCG. So I'm going to pause there now, and I guess it's an opportunity for people to ask questions, Annette.
It is. It's an opportunity. I'd love some questions that you might have, and then also we'd like to share with you the piece of work that we did. So on the 20th of February, when we had the extended leadership team, we then had a session at the end of the day where we looked at, okay, if we look at, for example, the spread of innovation, how would we know as an organisation that we were really brilliant at it, and what do we need to get there? And the thing for me from today is about actually, if you were to reflect on all that you've heard, and it's short sound bites really aimed at generating some thought and an appetite for more, what would you need to be brilliant at spreading innovation, having heard what you've heard? Because as I've said earlier, the important bit for me is that we create the environment where you have access to the right things, the ability to be skilled up in the right ways to enable you to make your job as exciting and as interesting and as successful as possible. So that's where I am. So if anybody got any questions? All right. Where do people feel we sit in terms of things like energy for change and the effectiveness and efficiency for change? So if you think about what Sharon was saying around the right brain and the left brain, where would you see our strength as an organisation? You need to come off mute if you're going to speak.
I think it's Beverly here.
Hi, Bev.
To me, this is a whole new way of doing things, and so there's quite a lot of catch-up, if you like, to go on, so that I can interact when I'm in a room full of people really well.
Yes.
Doing it this way, I just need to get a little bit more used to it, I think.
Absolutely.
Going at quite a fast pace here.
That's helpful.
Quite a learning curve.
Yeah, and likewise, you know, there was a bit for me around actually it was really important to try and be creative and do this in a different way, so that we try and live by what we said we were going to try and do as a new organisation. But you're absolutely right. For us all, there's something around getting to grips with the opportunities around the technology and also the content. So yeah.
So that's good, but lot to take in.
Yeah.
This is Alison.
Hi, Alison.
Hello. This is very weird, isn't it? I think for me, the key to this is giving people the chance to think about things. And I think this is the first time, I mean, I can see people in our office sitting, listening, and it's just about giving people the space to think about innovation. Because I think I was in a couple of conversations, and I think one of them might have been an early leadership team or authorisation meeting, and we said, what does innovation mean to every single person? And it's actually about relating it to your individual role, isn't it? And I think that can be quite difficult for people. So for me, it's about aligning what every individual does with the organisation's core mission, and people seeing that link and having that time to think sort of outside the box, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, about how we might do things differently. Because we're all working at such a pace and have been for such a long time.
I would agree with that, Alison. I think the other thing is what is innovation? You know, and I do think one of the things that strikes me about the CCG is that the people that are working in it, on the whole, really wanted to be here. And the reason they were selected to be here was because if you think about the interview process that we all went through, you know, it was very clear it was going to be, you know, best person for the job, people that really wanted to come on a journey around improvement and development. And I think inherently we all innovate all of the time, because most of the colleagues that I work with have got a real improvement methodology and brain. You know, none of us seem particularly content just to leave something as it is. We all seem to want to change it. And I do just wonder how much of this stuff we take for granted because it's just who we are and how we operate. And actually, I think when I started, as I said at the start of the session, when I started thinking about it, I thought, well, I don't know anything about innovation. And actually, as the time went on and I did a bit more research, I thought, do you know what? I do know quite a lot. But putting the theoretical models and some of the research behind it was really, really interesting. And I certainly, having done the work, feel a lot more confident around it.
I think we're not really good at celebrating what we do and recognising when we've been innovative and made a difference.
Yeah, it's just part of who we are, isn't it? Which is the interesting thing. Would anyone disagree with that, or do you all kind of feel a bit the same?
I think too, it's Ben again, there's something about us all being new to this, that we're sort of trying things out a bit before we go forward and make changes. We're all in a bit of a situation where we're just seeing how it goes and seeing how it beds down, and just there's lots going on in heads without necessarily taking it forward at this moment. But I think it will go forward as things settle down a bit more, and then we'll all start doing what we do best, which is making things work.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And I think if I just look at some of the stuff on the slide, we talked about actually how would we know when we're brilliant at trying to spread or at spreading innovation, and we talk about there actually, you know, we have the ideas are spread across the CCG. So actually what happens in one area is, you know, there's a culture which welcomes it in other parts of the patch, other parts of the CCG, and pulls it into there because it's seen as something that should happen and should be enabled. And I think there's something about us sort of being seen as being able to spread across a large patch and actively adopt the right things. I think one of the things that was really interesting was some of the feedback from the first stage. Sharon talked to you about Siri and Carruthers' piece of work around innovation, health and wealth. And when you look at that, when you read that document, that's all about adopting what looks like absolute sensible stuff. Yeah? And it, for me, you know, with a very logical head, so the very right brain that Sharon talks about, which is all about sort of effectiveness and efficiency, for me it seems absolutely sensible. Why wouldn't you adopt stuff which means that people don't have deep vein thrombosis? Why wouldn't you adopt a whole lot of technology which means that people are diagnosed and are cured more quickly? And actually what really made me stop and think was about this bit where Sharon talks about actually with that document, it was published and it's like, this has got to happen and this should happen because it's sensible. But what that never did was play to people's hearts. It never really inspired them. They were just told to go on and do it. So there's a real challenge for us in terms of how do we, if we want something to be adopted, how do we create a story, or how do we create a discussion with people which enables them to think, gosh, yeah, I really want some of that, or I want to be part of that, which is that left-hand bit around having that energy for change and them feeling as if they want to be part of that and move forward. And we were reflecting as a group a while ago about things like the Race for Life and cancer research. That's a huge, huge mobilisation of people to achieve a level of change. And actually that's been brought about by people being, something inside them thinking, actually, yeah, I want to do that to make a difference, or, it's important to me, rather than actually, yeah, I want to cure cancer because it's the right thing to do. And there's a real emotional thing with things like the Race for Life that we could quite creatively create with some of the discussions we have on a much smaller scale. But I do think we need to learn how to do some of this, because actually, we do some really awesome stuff around effectiveness and efficiency, and we can balance it off a bit by engaging with people in a slightly different way, which draws from their hearts. Any other thoughts or considerations?
What I wonder, Annette, is obviously people, working really hard to get their heads around this thing. And of course, when there's loads of people on a conference call as well, is you never know when you're just going to crash across someone. If you and I can sit here and catch each other's eyes and wave at each other when we want to talk, but other people may not be able to do that. I just wonder if anyone has anything that they reflect on after today, if they could email you or Amanda. That's Amanda Wicks. Any questions that you might be cogitating over your first glass of wine or your supper tonight and think, oh, I wonder about. So I think we should just allow people that space to come back at some point. So.
And absolutely, Sharon, I think that's a really good idea, because I think if you can have a little ponder, and sort of. For me, I suppose there's one question. Would you like to have access to more about this or not? Some of you will have an appetite, some of you won't. So let us know, because genuinely we want to form a programme of organisational development around what you want and need. And going forward over the next 3 other WebExes, we'll be asking a similar question. Actually, what is it that you want? What's important to you from the bits you've heard, and it's absolutely fine to have that reflective time, and we will work out how to get these onto an accessible website with the narrative, with all the words, so that you can also have the chance to listen again, because that may also be of help.